Okay, so the video you're about to watch is a video Paul and I recorded last night. It's just me, I wrote down some questions and kind of interviewed him on like everything regarding, you know, the last year and everything we've gone through. And it's important to me to kind of like show his perspective. I think it'll be something really nice to look back on, and also you know, give another perspective to like everyone watching. And also just kind of showcase how wonderful he is and how he has sacrificed so much this last year. He has been like there for me emotionally and physically. So many talks we've had, you know, constantly bouncing ideas off of him. He has been a really good soundboard for me to, or sometimes we talk about it in there, but just to hold me back from crazy stuff I want to do, and, you know, him, you know, just another person to give another perspective on. Also, he has sacrificed so much sleep. He has, while working a full-time job, more than 40 hours a week easily, he has picked up on laundry and lots of laundry and dishes and taking care of the girls, taking care of a newborn overnight, doing night feedings on weeks that I can't while I'm going through chemotherapy. And he just has done so much, sacrifice hanging out with his friends, sacrifice some of his hobbies, you know, to be here for the family. And it's just been wonderful. So I just want to like say that before we go into the video that we recorded last night. And I love Paul so much, and it would be really hard to go through this without him, particularly. It would just be, I don't know, I'm just so glad that I've had him. He's been wonderful this whole entire process and just loved me harder and been there for me more and more every single day. So I love you, Paul, and I hope all of you enjoy our very long conversation. All right, so I have Paul here now, and we're just gonna jump into the questions, and there's a lot of them, so we'll see how long the video is and how many we get through. All right, so first question I wrote down was, tell me about when we first discovered I had breast cancer and the pregnancy. What do you remember about it?
Okay, so I remember at first I wasn't super scared. I remember we found the mass, you went in for a number of tests, and I specifically remember taking you to the cancer center at U of M and parking and thinking to myself, well, I don't have to come back here very often. And it turns out that was super incorrect. And I remember, you know, the first time someone at one of the tests that you had sort of indicated that there was some reason to be concerned. And I remember that was really, that really put me on notice, but still, I guess throughout the beginning stages, I still was in a state of denial. And I remember, you know, right before your diagnosis, after the biopsy, when we were waiting for the results to come back, bless you.
Thank you.
I remember you had told me, you know, I think you shared this story in one of your videos before. It was late at night, we were in bed together, and we laid down, and you sort of turned to me, and I think you could tell that I was in denial, and you and the Lord, and, you know, he had kind of spoken to you, or at least you had come to peace or terms with the fact that you knew what was coming. And so you told me, you know, Paul, I just want you to know, you know, I'm pretty sure that the Lord is telling me that everything's not okay, but it's going to be okay. And I think that was the first time it hit me too. And I thought, okay, you know, I trust you a lot, and you know I trust your gut a lot,
yeah.
Even unfairly so.
He's always asking me, what does my gut tell me?
Yeah,
and like, I feel like a lot of pressure.
Well, she's rarely wrong. And so that's when it hit me that, okay, I think this is real, and I think I need to start thinking about this in different terms. And you know this, but I said, okay, love you, thank you for telling me. And then after you fell asleep, I went to the other side of the house and had a serious emotional talk with the Lord, and came to terms with, I think it was God preparing me. And you know, when we finally got the diagnosis officially, I remember we went for a walk and we spoke about it, and we both were shocked, but also kind of not surprised, because the Lord had prepared us, and we had a bit of peace and mixed with fear.
Yeah, it was good just knowing, like, for sure, so we can make a plan and move forward.
Yeah, and as a husband, it's the absolute last thing that I ever wanted. And right from the beginning, when the diagnosis became certain, it's kind of like I was flooded with thoughts that I didn't want to have, and pushed out of my mind. Like, you know, like all the what ifs, and I wish it was me, or I'd trade places, and all those things that are like tempting to dwell on, but wouldn't be like productive for helping the family.
And then, what were your thoughts when 2 days later you found out I was pregnant?
Oh man. Well, again, we were laying in bed. This is another us in bed revelation. And this time it was like, I don't know, like 5 a.m. or something. And you came out of the restroom and laid down next to me and said, you know what, Paul? I think you might need to go buy a pregnancy test. And I just remember immediately waking up all the way, because we had just spent the last 2 days talking about cancer and planning for what that might mean and all the avenues it might take, and the fact that we were pretty sure we wouldn't be able to have any more children, and just depending on the route. And there's a lot of reasons why we felt that. You can probably check out one of Tiffany's other videos to find out, but just because of her treatment plan. And I remember we were sitting out on the porch having coffee and thanking the Lord for Charlotte, and thinking, oh my goodness, we have one beautiful daughter, and we were really content. And so fast forward to that morning, I thought, okay, well, we're not going to leave that conversation right there. And I got right up and drove out to the local pharmacy and bought some tests, and they all came back pregnant. And so that really was an emotional roller coaster, because, and I'm happy that our initial reaction, I think it was like,
it wasn't sadness.
It wasn't sadness.
No, it was like, this complicates things.
Our initial reaction was, it was, wow, Lord, right now. And then I'll admit, from my perspective, I really wondered what it meant for the future. There was no question ever in my mind that we were going to do whatever it took to bring this baby into the world. But at the same time, I want to do whatever it takes to protect my wife. And, Tiffany's diagnosis hit me like the biggest surprise in the world, because she was young, healthy, and vibrant. And so we hadn't done much research about cancer or cancer in pregnancies. And so there was a lot to learn that we didn't know at the time. So it was really exciting and honestly kind of scary at the same time.
So this question you kind of already answered, but I'll ask it if you want to add anything. But in general, what was hard about the diagnosis?
Oh man. Like I said earlier, it's the last thing that you want to hear about your wife. And I knew once we got the diagnosis that our lives were going to be flipped upside down. And the hard thing about the diagnosis is, and we'll probably talk about this more, but when I think about the impact on our family and on you, first of all, I never want to watch you go through something like that. And second of all, I immediately knew it was going to be, I would have little to no ability to impact or affect change in your body. And that all the help that I could do would be with our house and our family, and with prayer. And so that was, like, if I'm thinking about what was difficult for me, that was it. And to this day, knowing that I can't really do much for you or your body or even your symptoms is really tough.
But doing all that for, like, the house and the kids and prayer, like, is what you can do, and is the most helpful thing you can do, because, like, way less things I have to worry about or take care of. You already kind of covered this again, but what were your initial thoughts when you did find out I had cancer?
I had been somewhat mentally preparing for it ever since our conversation that night where you told me that you were pretty sure of what was coming. I was happy to be with you. First of all, it came through a phone call where they described your biopsy results. And I remember the person who communicated it to us saying, lobular carcinoma, and I remember the word invasive being used, and I remember hearing DCIS, and I remember thinking, oh my goodness, it's 2 cancers in the word invasive.
And we didn't know anything about
and we knew nothing. We knew nothing.
Things. Like, we were writing them down so we could Google them.
Yes. Yeah. And so I remember thinking, like, this is too much. This is too much for us to handle. And but then we went for a walk and we spoke about it, and I remember here's my wife, who I didn't know at the moment was pregnant, and seemingly at peace with this concept and, like, ready to take it on. And so I was really stunned by that. And to be honest with you all, throughout this experience, and you probably have already seen it from watching Tiffany's videos, she's an amazing woman, and she exhibits strength that can only come from the Lord. And this recurrence, the second round, has been significantly harder on us than the first round that we're kind of, like, dwelling on right now for this portion of Tiffany's questions. And if I know her, she has a thorough list of questions, so we'll get to the rest later. But it's almost hard to say that often, or several times throughout the last year, I feel like she's carrying us, and I know who's carrying her. So that, from the moment she got the diagnosis, it was pretty clear to me that the Lord was going to help us get through it.
It's hard to imagine someone going through this without knowing the Lord, like how, like, hopeless you could feel, and so I'm just really thankful that we have him.
Yep.
Okay, tell me about, so, like, after got the diagnosis just about 2.5 weeks, maybe 3-ish weeks later, I think 2.5, 3 weeks later, I had surgery. So tell me about waiting for me during the surgery.
Okay, that was honestly one of the single hardest moments for me, and I feel strange that we're spending this video talking about me, but that's the point, right?
Yes, that's the point.
Okay. So I remember we went, oh my goodness, do you remember the anxiety the night before and the day of? And like, now we know my wife is pregnant, and now we know that she has to have like a mastectomy with a little tiny baby growing inside of her. We know that they're not going to be able to provide the same suite of pain medications that they normally would if she wasn't pregnant. And, you know, the doctors had told us that, you know, I think we had a good team of doctors, and they had told us that they were comfortable doing the surgery right then, but there's never any promises or guarantees. So, and we've never done this before. So the night before, you know, first thing we had to encounter is my pregnant wife has to fast and not eat. And so we had like a little pizza party the last minute. But, you know, really, I just remember the day of, because we didn't go in until the afternoon, just being filled with anxiousness. And we went to the hospital. There was a wait. There was a lot of like COVID restrictions that were in like full swing. And so we ended up going out and waiting in the garden courtyard area. And I just remember holding my wife thinking, oh my goodness. I would say that was some of the height of anxiety for us. Do you agree?
Yeah.
And I thought it wouldn't get any worse. And then they took us back to pre-op. And then it got worse. And so then, you know, skipping through that, I thought it couldn't get any worse than that level of anxiety. Just holding her hand, waiting for them to wheel her back. But then it got way worse. A group of strangers came and took my wife and wheeled her down to the surgery suite, and I could not go with her. And since we got married, I would say we've done pretty much everything together, especially everything that we thought was a hard thing. And once again, here I was, unable to help my wife physically, and I was sending her away with people whom I had never met to go to surgery. And when I looked at her, I could see in her eyes that she was scared, and there was like no comfort left for me to provide her. And I remember we came to this wide section hallway, and the surgeons took her away and to the right, and I had to go left. And honestly, that was overwhelming. And so I went back out to the courtyard where we just were to pray, and it turned into a big cry session. And then it was about 7 hours of surgery, and every 30 minutes to an hour, I would go bother the man at the surgical family waiting area and ask him for updates. And they gave me a pager, and he reminded me every time that they would page me when they had something to tell me. And every time I would say, okay, thank you, what's going on with Tiff? To the point where one time I walked up to him, and she had been back there for a couple of hours, and he became frustrated and sort of like rolled his eyes and said, do you want me to tell you the exact time they did the first incision? And I said, yes, please. And he was like, he logged into his computer and told me, and I just listened, and he's like, 3:42 p.m. or whatever he said. And I said, okay, thank you. Wrote it down in my little notebook, went back to meeting. But honestly, that was extremely stressful. And but I got a lot of love, a lot of messages from people who were praying for Tiffany during the time. And honestly, it means the world to know that people are petitioning the Lord on her behalf, people who take it seriously, and people who pray like there's something at stake. And do you want me to talk about when I came to see you after?
Yeah, the next question.
Okay,
yeah.
Okay. So it was late, and at 9 p.m., that's when they were going to kick out all the visitors, and it was getting really close. It was like 8:50, and I hadn't seen her yet. And then they finally called me back so I could come see Tiff. And honestly, I was so excited to see her. And I remember rounding the corner, and when I saw her, all of my excitement was immediately replaced with just absolute fear and sadness, because Tiffany was in a ton of pain. And she was laying on a hospital bed, groggy, just coming out of anesthesia, but just writhing in pain and moaning in pain. And I remember there was a nurse there who was doing everything he could, but he looked a little bit flustered, and he looked at me and said, she's pregnant, I've given her everything I can. And my Tiff was asking for more help, and they couldn't give it to her. And after a couple of minutes of that, they said, okay, sir, it's time to go. COVID restrictions, you can't stay for the night. And it was crushing. It was crushing. And like I said, it feels really lame to be talking about how, oh, this is hard for me, I'm crushed, when Tiffany was the one doing all the work. But having to leave her was another reminder that I had little to no power in this exchange to help or to protect my wife or to provide for her. And so I do remember that they told me I had to go like a different way when it was time to leave, and and they told me to say goodnight, and I wanted to know where they were going to take her, so I said, okay, good night, Tiff, I'll see you later, and I waited for them to walk away around the corner, and I followed them secretly so I could see where they were going, and because I knew in the morning if I came and checked in surgical short stay, they would make me wait because there was like these limited COVID hours, and I wanted to like bypass that, so I saw where they took her into the surgical short stay unit, and then I like reverse engineered it back to the parking lot, and so the next morning I just went straight there. And I came early, and they said, oh, visiting hours aren't until blah, blah, blah time. And I said, I know, but I'm here. And they let me see you.
They did. The nurses did, yeah.
Yeah, they did.
She like shut my curtain though.
Yeah, because it was a secret.
Yes. Okay, so then when I did go home the next day, and like the next couple of weeks, what are some things you had to do for me to like help me?
Oh man, I feel like you're just having me tell the saddest stories.
Sorry.
It's okay. When I brought Tiff home from the hospital, I was so happy to have her home. But it was very sad.
The first couple
days were really hard. I had never been the sole caretaker for someone who was coming out of a big surgery. And, you know, for many of you watching, maybe you've been through this, maybe you've been through worse, but for us it was new. And, you know, I brought my wife home with, she had a mastectomy. So she had a large scar, and she had a drain, and it needed to be cared for. But she also had extreme fatigue and was very nauseated and very groggy and had no energy, and so she needed pretty much help with pretty much everything: getting dressed, moving around the house, you know, food, everything. And the biggest, one of the most alarming things to me, having never seen Tiff come out of major anesthesia, was that she was not herself. She was not the, you know, you've seen her go from like spunky to kind of tired from chemo, and but I was used to all spunky, lively, and what I had was like slow, tired, sad, distant Tiff who's in pain. And so some of the things I had to do for you, I think I already mentioned them, you know, trying to keep up with the house, trying to take care of Charlotte, mom and, or at least get her carted off to mom and dad's. Every couple of hours, we had an intense medication regimen that we kept track of in a logbook. You know, I got Tiffany a rose gold service bell that you would like see like at a hotel, because you know, no matter where I was in the house, and I was working remote, no matter where I was in the house, I didn't want her to have to like strain her voice and yell to get me, so she could just ring the bell and I would like come running, right? Yeah. And
I do it sometimes just for a kiss.
Yes, yes, that's right. I was happy to give it, and you know, I knew also part of my job was to get her up and moving. So whenever she felt up to it, I would take her out for a walk. And this is the girl who like kicked my butt to do a half marathon. And it was like I was carrying her down the driveway and back once, and she would come back inside and she'd be so tired she'd take a nap for an hour and a half. And so it was hard. And every couple of hours she needed to have her drain cleaned. And I'm not going to be too graphic, but just if you don't know what that's like, it's like a 2.5 to 3 foot length of surgical tubing that's coming out of the surgery site, out of the skin, and it collects fluid. And someone has to help that person. It's called stripping the drain. And what you do is you take the hose and you anchor it with this hand because you don't want to pull on it. And then you take this hand and you squeeze the tube and you strip all of that excess liquid out into a pouch, and then you empty it and write it down.
Measure it and then empty it.
Measure it.
Write it down.
Yeah, measure it, log it, write it down. And surprise, surprise, Tiff hated it.
We do it 3 times or more a day? I don't remember.
Finally, there was something I could do to physically help my wife, you know, through this treatment process, and it hurt her. So my job.
It wasn't like painful, just uncomfortable, and like I just didn't want to do it.
And so that was one of the things that I did for you.
And you washed my hair and put it up in buns.
I did.
This time around, you won't have to do that. I have surgery in like 2 months.
Yes.
About 2 months again. And like this is kind of reminding me of how hard it was, but I'm hoping it won't be as bad for the second time around. I don't know. Were you worried about anything after the surgery? Like super concern you?
I definitely had things I was worried about. Sorry, just heard our baby crying. So I was worried about the success of the surgery. Dr. Dossett had mentioned that, you know, there was some concern about the margins, and that they would look into it. I was concerned about the amount of pain you were in. I was concerned, I'd heard it was a 6 to 8 week recovery, and I honestly didn't know if it was going to be 8 weeks of day 1 style pain, and luckily it wasn't. And, you know, I was worried about taking care of Charlotte, you know, long term through that 2 months.
Okay, baby's taken care of. We hope. We will see. I have monitor right here. Next question is, how is my pregnancy, or like your perception or your thoughts and feelings towards the pregnancy affected because of everything you're going through?
So I was a man who had a wife with invasive breast cancer while being pregnant. So naturally that comes with a lot of anxiety and a lot of wondering what's going to happen. And, you know, our doctors told us pretty quickly that pregnant women can go through chemotherapy, but, you know, being like a sort of a layman who's uneducated about cancer, and like, so really coming up for 30 years of my life just knowing the stigmas about cancer, it's like one thing to hear it, but it takes a long time to really trust that, right?
Yeah, or not chemo, but like treatments. I didn't do chemo when I was pregnant.
No, but at that point we didn't know.
Yeah, that's true.
At that point we didn't know.
Yeah.
And so initially there was a lot of fear surrounding chemo, but luckily we didn't have to do chemo the first time through. And then, so that kind of ties into that, my next thought, which was, well, okay, so luckily we don't have to do chemo, but is there anything that we should do normally that we wouldn't have the opportunity to do because you were pregnant?
Yeah.
And that became a pretty big source of concern for me, because obviously I want to protect the baby 100%, and I want to protect you 100%, but sometimes, you know, my fear is that that wouldn't be possible.
Yeah.
And so, you know, after your surgery, we were kind of left with some good news that your lymph nodes came back clear, but also there was a little bit of concern about your margins because they found some tissue close to the 12 o'clock region that had some cancer cells. And so, you know, the doctors had told us that they would normally do radiation, but we'd have to wait until after Abby came to do the radiation. And so, from my perspective, that came with concerns. Like, concerns that over the course of the following months of your pregnancy, I was able to push to the back of my mind, but they never really went away.
Same thing, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And it was just sort of like I guess we'll just wait till February and find out. And I was, of course, hoping for the best and hoping that, you know, we were done with cancer. That's how we used to say it too.
Yeah.
We're just going to have surgery, and then it's going to have removed it all, and we're going to be done with cancer. And obviously, you guys all know that's not how it turned out. In fact, what we were afraid of in the back of our minds was probably happening right at that very moment.
How did COVID make an impact on my pregnancy and treatments and cancer?
Oh my goodness. You guys can probably all imagine what I'm going to say, but a huge impact, because I couldn't help with treating your cancer, but what I could try to do is keep you safe and protect our family. And this all started very shortly into the COVID pandemic. So when Tiffany we first found out you were sick, we didn't know what to think. It was a global pandemic. It was shutting down the global economy. And, you know, I'm not like, there's no point, we're not going to use this time to be political in any way, but I think we all know that there was a lot of, especially at the beginning, dynamic information coming out about COVID. And all I knew is that I wanted to protect my family from it, and that after surgery, Tiffany's immune system would be down, and that she was pregnant. And we didn't really know what was going on with pregnant ladies who got COVID. And so, you know, in our dynamic, Tiffany is always the one who's ready to like have more adventures and be more daring, and I'm always the one who's more safety and protection minded. And so I immediately started having the family like peel back, and our church was doing remote service.
We started peeling back before we knew my cancer came back too, a little bit, like right before I found out the cancer was back as well, like just because of pregnancy.
Yep, absolutely. And because, so basically your question is, did COVID have an impact? And what was the impact? The impact was it added layers of uncertainty and fear, and it prevented us from engaging in social activities and going to do things that we would normally do that would give us a sense of like community and like we have a life outside of pregnancy and cancer, to be honest.
Yeah. And then you obviously couldn't go to a lot of my appointments.
Thank you for mentioning that.
Chemo.
Yeah, that's a huge one that, you know, if it wasn't 11:15 p.m., we were fighting to get the babies to bed, it would have been front of mind. But basically, that was the hardest part, I would say, was that my wife had cancer, but for much of her treatment, I would drop her off at the hospital and go wait in the parking lot and come get her after. And I couldn't be there in person for a lot of those really critical conversations that I would have wanted to be there for.
You got to go to a lot of the pregnancy appointments until the very end.
But to this day, I have not been able to go to a single one of Tiffany's infusions. I have not been able to go to many of her in-person consultations, and with the oncology team, the plastic surgery team, and that has been extremely difficult. It takes, as a husband, man, it continues to feel silly to talk about, but as a husband, in a situation where I already feel like I don't have a lot of ability to take care of her physically, it removes that even more to where it really feels like I am just a spectator, just watching my best friend go through the worst time of her life, and I can't even be in the appointment to hold her hand, and it's tough.
You've done really good though. So with everything else. Okay, so how have you grown as a person from this season? As a Christian.
Well, which one?
Well, there's two questions, but you can like put them together, because I think.
Okay, what's the first question?
How have you grown as a person for this season, then how have you grown as a Christian?
I have a dense patch of white coming in my beard right here, and this is creeping back more and more all the time. So, I don't know if this is a fair answer, but I've grown to really be inspired by you. I've grown to love my wife even more. And it's interesting that I think you've heard Tiffany say this, but our lives have been pretty blessed. Our lives continue to be very blessed. And to the point where I can say pretty confidently, we've had tough moments, but we've never had to really endure real hardship where there's a lot on the line. Like a life on the line. And so as a person, I walked away from this knowing, and I didn't know this before, at least not really, that there's no guarantee that I'll get to grow old with my wife. And there's like no promise that if you eat clean and exercise and, try and do the right things and try your best to follow a moral lifestyle and to serve the Lord, that, it's all going to be taken care of the way that you think it should. So as a person, I would say that's a big takeaway here. I've also learned, oh my goodness, what it's like to be a mom.
Yeah.
That is some crazy stuff. Like when Abby was a newborn,
he did a lot of the newborn stuff because I couldn't at times.
Like those night feedings and like on call for every whimper and cry. That's intense. So as a person, that's some of the growth. And I've learned how to cook a little better.
Yeah.
But,
and clean and do dishes.
Yes.
He does so much laundry now.
It's crazy.